welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. I don't know, anyone here maybe was a previous attendee to some of the webinars. We took a little bit of a hiatus over the summer, so we're back. This is our first one of this academic year. We are very lucky to be joined by Dr. Adam from Ally Psych and Alyssa Capillari, Program Coordinator from New Frontiers. I'm Casey Schmaliker, I'm the Assistant Director at New Frontiers, and we're very excited tonight to be talking about psychoeds, adaptability, social skills, and kind of a wide array of things that as professionals we've seen are important to know about with this transition back to school and with this previous pandemic year that we faced. So I'm going to launch a poll and then just go through a little bit of how we run this for anyone that hasn't attended one before. So just at first, if you can say, just answer based off of what you are attending as. And so click on anything that applies. And as you go through that, that's just so that we can make sure that we're speaking to the population in attendance. On this note also, please, throughout this, we have some questions to get the conversation started. But as we start going through, please do submit any questions using the question dialog box that you can find. And on the same token, I will get to the questions as they make sense. You can either direct them to either of our panelists here. And then just throughout, I'll give the opportunity at the end if anyone would prefer to speak their questions. So I'll be sure to if you raise your hand at the end, I'll be able to turn on my mic, turn on your mic. So let me just go to this poll and close it out now. So just to go over, 50% are professionals. 13% of the parent of high school students, and then 38% parent of other. We'll get into a little bit college students most likely. And so I wanted to just start off, so Dr. Adam, this topic of adaptability, social well-being, and motivated learning. I mentioned when introducing this about psychoeds. And so just what are psychoeds and what are things that people can learn from?
Sure. Okay, so great way to start it off. Psychoeds or psychoeducational evaluations, which also are known as independent educational evaluations, depending on how you're going about it. But these evaluations are used to look at the strengths and weaknesses of an individual in an academic setting, usually. So opposed to a typical psychological evaluation that will look more at personality and behaviors, a psychoeducational evaluation or psychoed is going to help determine, again, the strengths, weaknesses, the areas of those strengths and weaknesses. It will test for giftedness. It will also test for special needs or like the severe deficits that might be present.
Awesome. And so, Alyssa, I'd love to get into some more of the specifics of where this comes up with coaching, but just, I know some of the people here, it's like the title of this was about adaptability, social well-being, and motivated learning. Where, as a coach, have you looked for psychoeds or other types of evaluations in the context of those three terms? So just that adaptability, social well-being, and motivated learning. Where does that help?
Of course. So I think when we approach coaching, right, especially when we're trying to figure out who is this individual in front of us, right? I'm here deciding to be a partner in your process. I'm trying to evaluate what is the current playing field of all that you're trying to navigate. And I'm well aware that the time in which we spend together is such a small snapshot into the life that they live and the world they operate within. So a lot of the times, you know, a psychoed provides so much context and just insight into, you know, how someone is engaging educationally, behaviorally, socially, across multiple contexts beyond the time that we're just in session together. So a lot of the times, you know, we recognize that the behavior I might see in session might be totally different than what occurs in the classroom, or, you know, what occurs in the classroom, you know, might not necessarily occur at home. So it is just always kind of that starting point of gathering more information. A lot of the individuals we work with, and myself included, have this like analysis paralysis where we want to gather all the information and figure out, you know, okay, what is the best course of action? I think a lot of the time when we're trying to find out a different means of being as an option to navigate a different situation, you know, with new eyes, it's helpful to have the evaluation because it sometimes clears out a lot of the guesswork in terms of what's an appropriate place to start. You know, if I look at the recommendations of a evaluation and it's like, oh, so-and-so does really, you know, well with X, I'm going to start there. If it's, we have experiences with Y and it went horrible, I'm not going to introduce that as a strategy. So informing perspective, I think, is one of the best uses of a psychoed when it crosses my inbox.
And I think that's, I mean, so we have both professionals and parents here. And so oftentimes we're looking at kids, young adults struggling. And this is where that adaptability piece comes in. But like, Adam, what are some of the things that people, like almost what breaks the camel's back when people come to you and are like, finally, like I need this evaluation,
Sure.
because, and just the more proactive sense of that, like when should people be considering this to almost save time? And this is where I'm going to then slowly bridge over towards these recent transitions we're facing. But what do you see most people finally decide to get a more in-depth evaluation? And then also maybe what are some of the precursors for either professionals to recommend over or for parents to consider?
Yeah, so let me first, Alyssa, I mean, the way you want to look at psychoeds and how you find them helpful as a coach for the students you work with is like dead on, right? A good psychoed eval is going to be super comprehensive and do a lot of that legwork for you so you don't get stuck in the analysis paralysis like you had talked about. A good psychoed is going to include things like classroom observations. We look at IQ, achievement scores, all of that stuff to give the other stakeholders in the student's life a head start. So you can hit the ground running, so you know what to avoid and what to really focus on, both to sharpen their skills and to just avoid pitfalls. Casey, to answer your question, which was a great segue into it. So what gets parents on the phone and looking for a psychoed eval is typically one of two things. They are either incredibly frustrated with the services that are, or lack thereof, being provided to their child in the school system. And that's typically going to be in a public school situation. Or parents want to get that head start like you talked about. So just really quickly, I'm based in Pennsylvania, and so I can only really speak to Pennsylvania law because that's what I'm familiar with and deal with. So for example, a student in a public school in Pennsylvania, any student can request a psychoeducational evaluation the school has to respond within, I believe it's 10 days. And then after you sign a permission slip to have them evaluate your child, the school has to complete that evaluation within 60 days. Now, if you take all of the kids in a school district, and there are only so many school psychologists performing these evaluations, they're not going to be very thorough. They're not going to be top tier type of evaluations. So a lot of kids will fall through the cracks with more nuanced concerns, right? So a lot of times parents will get these evaluations and go, this isn't going to be helpful. These recommendations aren't going to be, they're not what we're looking for. It's missing the mark. Or they say, all right, we'll give it a go. A couple months go by, the kid isn't improving at all or hardly receiving services. So then the family's going to look for an outside opinion. And I like to remind parents that the school is very well intended. Truly, they are. But they're limited in their resources. They also have different, not agendas, their agenda is to help the kid, but they can't truly fully advocate for the student the same way a private psychoeducational evaluator will be able to. Because the school psychologist, they are beholden to the school district. We are beholden to you, the client. You are our responsibility. We are your advocate. So those are typically the two situations, and they both breed from frustration. So when a parent gets overly frustrated, that's when we end up getting the phone call. And if they want to get, you had mentioned kind of this jump start, the time to do that is if early on your child is missing or is late through their developmental milestones, if a pediatrician or if an early education teacher, like in preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, if they are voicing concerns about certain behaviors, like if you're not initiating play, if you're falling behind with reading or writing or like your letters, whatever it might be. Even things like sharing can be indicative of future problems to come. It's never really too early in your child's academic career. Once we hit like elementary school, certainly middle school, it's never too early to get these things in motion, because the earlier you get these evaluations started, you have a paper trail, and that paper trail will be so useful for, when they enroll in services like executive function coaching and all of that, where now we have a timeline, and every so many years a reevaluation will occur, and you'll be able to track the progress of each student, of your student. So starting mid to late elementary school, certainly middle school, if a pediatrician, a teacher is noticing deficits, if you notice deficits, if your kid is spending so much time on homework that it's like, they're struggling way too much for what this is, maybe it's time to just consider, make a couple phone calls and see if it sounds like the right thing to do.
I also just feel like it's important for anyone here, whether it be professionals, parents, it doesn't even matter about the age of your kids, the parents, knowing more information about yourself is never a bad thing. It's useful.
No.
And that's why just sometimes like it's framed in the context of solving a problem. Maybe it's just in the search of greater knowledge. Yep, go ahead, Ed.
So, and to that, like more knowledge, I'm sure you guys see it all the time, where it's not always about a deficit that's in place. Sometimes it's what seems like a deficit or negative behavior in the school environment is really because your child isn't being challenged enough, or the student isn't being challenged enough in that classroom environment, if they are gifted and they're in typical classrooms, right? They're not in accelerated rooms or whatever each calls them. They're going to be bored out of their mind. And that boredom is going to appear a lot like inattention. So you might go, oh, my kid has ADHD, oh my God. Or he's a behavior problem because he's like just talking to all the other students. It's because they're bored.
Yeah. And
No, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Kate.
no, go ahead, listen.
Well, no, I think a lot of it really is helpful for strategic planning, right? Of how do we implement a more like universal design for learning, making sure that the individual, regardless of context, is being presented with material in the best potential way, that they're engaging with that content in a way that is conducive, and they're, being presented with opportunities to express what it is that they know in the way that they can showcase it. And identifying what is necessarily difference does not equate to deficit. And I think that is the expectation that we have to unpack a little bit, right? Of when we talk about, okay, we need to get someone evaluated. There is that like inherent, oh my goodness, what are we going to, why do we need to do this process? But I think if you look at this exactly as you said, it's just an opportunity to learn more and then better, find the way to conduct, someone's education, someone's social interaction, someone's, self-monitoring skills. Ultimately, it all feeds into that skill of metacognition and being aware of what it is that I'm doing, how do I do it, and how do I then guide my life with that knowledge.
And
Absolutely.
so we're definitely going to come back to this piece. I may have jumped the gun of going to kind of assessing where the real problems are. And so just Adam, from your context, from that more mental health, the way the brain works, wearing that psychologist hat, why so many people have been waiting for this return to normal? Back on the college campus, I'm going back to work, or professionals, you're back in school, isn't that so exciting? And it's felt like this kind of light at the tunnel that we're going to. And I'm going to use multiple analogies in this question, but
I'm all about analogies.
it always seems greener on the other side. But this was a narrative a lot of people told themselves. These are problems from COVID. This is the isolation. This is they're alone. They haven't been in school. I've had people calling me. We're trying to get them ready to gear up their academic parts of their brain again. Why has it been not as nice as we thought? Why is that adaptability being tested so much here with a lot of people in this transition? Whether like there's some college students that never attended in-person classes. They were virtual the entire year last year. They're sophomores now. There's people that didn't go to their senior year of high school and they transitioned freshman year of college. Holy crap. So just why was this so difficult? What about the brain and a lot of the people that we work with, whether they have learning differences or giftedness in different areas, just people that learn differently? Why has this been so difficult?
Sure. So I want to highlight people are struggling with this, not just those with learning differences, right? I mean, this has become a systemic problem in how we're going about what I'll use the word you use, adaptability. So I'll try to answer in order of what you brought up, but if I don't mention something, just bring me back to it. You mentioned, again, adaptability. So at the start of COVID, we were all used to pre-COVID times, right? Great. We adapted to that throughout our entire lifespan. Beautiful. And then all of a sudden, we had to adapt to COVID. Now, if it was what I remember in the very beginning, it was like, oh, just 2 weeks. Just give us 2 weeks of isolation, of quarantining, and then we're gonna, PA had wall up the wave of COVID or whatever it was at the time, like what phrasing. So, all right, if it was 2 weeks, if it was a month, even if it was 2 months, the human psyche, we're not going to change. Like, we will do temporary changes, but then it'll be a pretty easy and smooth transition back because it wasn't that long of a time, right? The human, just the human, can do almost any behavior for a short period of time before it really becomes ingrained. And I think the best example of that is masks, and not like wearing them, remembering them. The first couple weeks when everyone was going back out, you would leave your car and go, oh crap, I have to get my mask. And then now it's, you grab your keys and then you grab your mask, or you grab your phone, your mask, and they're always in your pockets or around your car. It's second nature at this point. So now, as we try to transition back, or we're being told, all right, like, let's return to normal, it's not our normal anymore, right? Our normal at this point, it's been 2 years. Our normal has become the COVID precautions and the way we've lived life for 2 years. That's a tremendous amount of time, all things considered, right? And then if we look at teenagers specifically, that is a significant fraction of their life. It is a significant fraction of core developmental periods that they're going through with their life. If you look at an adult, all right, they have the vast majority of their life, they've ingrained all these behaviors, they're kind of stuck in their ways, great, good. Teenagers, though, they're thrust into these situations where they are pulled from their social life, essentially. And then they have to go to school virtually. They don't get to see their friends in real life, only virtually, or through headsets or FaceTime, whatever it is. And now we're saying, okay, just go back to it. Go back to how it used to be. And there aren't going to be any repercussions to it. But what we're seeing is this huge deficit in social skills. We're seeing people who have gotten used to this virtual atmosphere, this virtual way of interacting with other people, all of a sudden not being as comfortable face to face. I think over the past 2 years, apps like TikTok have really skyrocketed in popularity, where before it was still a problem, but now even more so, we have 60-second attention spans. But you're expecting a student to go back into the classroom, not have access to their phone, and pay attention for, how long is a class? 40 minutes, 45 minutes. If you're in college, it's anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half or 3 hours.
Those 3-hour classes.
That's a really, they're rough. But it's almost an impossible or unrealistic task to ask of someone, at least to do fluidly. Just pretend the last 2 years didn't happen behaviorally. How?
And I think that's such an important, it's behaviors. And so, Alyssa, I wanted to, something that's so interesting about what the pandemic did is we reverted to very safe environments, not just safe from COVID, but an insulated, safe environment in our homes, on our couches, protected by a screen. And so now we can slowly get more abstract of how things were safer. You weren't out in front of people. You weren't putting yourself out there socially. You didn't have to engage. A question to a teacher for help was over email or some type of texting format. And so you do a lot of work socially. And so just to give some context for the parents, let's frame it this way. How hard is it to teach social skills to people? Like, what about the social skills? And so I know, like, I'll lead the question a little bit. You're always looking for social learning opportunities when coaching, right? And so why does that make this so hard? This adaptability with all of these social skills we have to work on it.
So I think there are two parts to that, right? There's the one that like I didn't have to flex this muscle for a while, right? And it's not that anyone lost social skills or they diminished. It's just that, think about it, like it atrophied a little bit in terms of my frame of reference is now different. I'm being asked to re-engage, but even though, yes, I'm physically there, that is a different playing field. But also we have to think about what is it they're bringing to these new social opportunities. We have students that spent a year and a half without really true acknowledgement of personhood. And I think that's the first thing we need to think about. When you go to school, pre-COVID, now even those that are in person, they walk in hallways, they stand outside of classrooms, someone holds a door open for them, they are seen. We put kids inside, no one saw them. They sat in a Zoom waiting room, no one saw them. There was all of those small little social opportunities. I think about even in terms of adults, right? Going places, being, a person, being like a physical being, right? That someone acknowledges. All of that was stripped away. So all of that feedback that you naturally get to kind of acknowledge, who you are and situate yourself within a world was not necessarily there for a lot of individuals for more than a year. Now we're thrusting them back into a building where everyone sees them. So there was the comfort in being, not in anyone's limelight, but now I have to soak up as much as I can. And I think that is that unspoken piece that makes teaching social skills now really difficult, because we have to first start with that self-monitoring piece, that self-awareness of like, oh, I need this a little bit, right? I need to be engaging. I need to be seen. I need someone to say like, hi, you are here. I see you, right? Because that fills like a social emotional need that's important for development and important for, the construction of like self-actualization, right? That's important. And then from there, we have to look at, well, what was socially appropriate before, which maybe, might make other people uncomfortable now. I think, even in terms of adults, right? You go to a grocery store, someone drops something. 3 years ago, I would not have hesitated to pick up someone else's groceries that they've just paid for and hand it to them. Now I'm like, do you want me touching your stuff? I don't know, right? We're now students in that same position where they're like, do you want to talk to me? I don't know. Are you comfortable? So there's one thing of, am I comfortable engaging? But two, do you even want to be engaging with me? Because we've instilled a little bit of a fear of proximity.
I'm laughing so much because I had like September after COVID lockdown, things were starting to open up. It's my birthday in September. And my best friend was there when they brought out my cake with candles on it. And there's a photo of me blowing out the candles and her side-eyeing me aghast because she's like, you're blowing all over this cake we're all going to eat right now. And it's just, it's so funny about that feedback loop, right? Like, I look at that photo and I could laugh at myself because I'm a 30-year-old, 31 now, grown man that can make fun of myself and take it. But there's, like to Adam's point before, a lot of, in college, you're talking about 1/10 of your life was in a bubble, really. You didn't build up this resilience and grit.
Well, and not only just 1/10 of your life, but developmentally, 1/10 of your life that is some of the most critical social development for adulthood, right? That senior year of high school, that freshman year of college, really becoming comfortable interacting with strangers, making friends, all of it. And Alyssa, to your point, I think it's really interesting, the idea of being seen. I honestly never thought about it in that light before. And my mind goes to how unfortunate that much of it was also self-inflicted when we have teenagers who don't turn their cameras on. So they're also minimizing their opportunity to be seen. And what does that say about their own self-perception, right? On one hand, it's much more comfortable. I don't have to be seen. A lot of their insecurities that they might have felt if they were bullied or didn't feel welcomed in their school or their classroom, now they have an opportunity to be a bit more hidden. But it's become such an interesting dynamic and almost like this unprecedented behavioral experiment on what happens when you pull all of these people from all different ages. How are they going to respond? And now let's throw them back in and see how they're going to respond with that again.
I'm sure there's someone doing a test on resiliency and bounce back right now through the lifespan to see.
I couldn't imagine.
And so, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Casey. I think about also like their consequence, right? Of how we're engaging virtually, how students kind of learn to arm themselves, because if you did something embarrassing in class, in person, it happened, people saw it maybe, the moment passed. Virtually, if I always with clients, I joke all the time. I'm like, if I glitch like and I freeze, like, please don't turn me into a meme. Like, you're gonna screenshot. I know.
I've done that.
Right? And so that's also the like, okay, I'm thinking of all of these additional potential threats socially. So, I continue to kind of like put up, I'm not going to show my video because I don't want to look at me because I see what everyone else is seeing. Whereas before, right, you just were there.
And narcissism is picking up to an all-time high where, I don't know about anyone else, but if I'm on a video chat, 80% of the time I'm looking at myself.
I'm totally noticing I'm in the shadows right now. Like, that's all
like I'm constantly like, all right, like how am I in frame? What's going on? All that stuff. And it's like this cycle that happens where, all right, if I'm on camera, I'm looking at myself, and then I'm deepening any insecurities or being a bit more nitpicky, and then I'm not going to want to be on camera anymore. But if I'm not on camera, then I'm lacking all those social skills and I'm not flexing those muscles as best I can in this environment. And I think it's a really interesting parallel to segue a little bit. The classroom behaviors that we were seeing and are seeing, I'm curious what they're going to look like, but I think about all of the clients I've had that struggled socially in the classroom, that were identified as like the problem kids, right? What that's going to turn into. So
the transition over to the academics, I think, is a great segue. And so, Alyssa, I'd love for you, and then Adam, and then I want to move, this will be the last kind of question on problems. We'll then look at the intersection between and the crossbreeding of problems, and then talk about some strategies and solutions. But Alyssa, you talked about social skills as a muscle that wasn't used. What about learning? So you coached throughout this. You saw the academics throughout this. You saw the coursework. You saw the leniency from teachers and professors, the lack of due dates. And then you saw everyone go back, and it was normal again. No transition, we're back in person. rigidity from professors. We have to get back to these standards, honor lock on tests, all of this stuff. So what did that look like from your end? Like, what were you hearing from clients in terms of, like, I feel like schooling in academia went back to 100 miles per hour and no one was ready for it. And so just what was that experience from the outside of what you were seeing some of these kids and young adults struggling with? And why is that such a problem with these adaptability skills? Like that expectation to adapt so quickly to such a higher rate.
I think the best kind of like, we're gonna ride off on metaphors on this, it's just like it very much of like a rubber band snapping back because of the sting that it left for all of the students that, you know, they were like, wait a minute, anything goes. And it did. Anything did go, from the assignment where it was like, rewrite the ending of Forrest Gump using inserting 3 new US history presidents, to like cast your own A Midsummer Night's Dream. Oh, you cast all NBA players? Fine. Like, to your homework was due at 12. It's 12:05. I'm not accepting it. Even though the modality, you know, is the same. It's like I submitted it online. It's very disorienting for students. And I think, you know, a lot of them were lulled. They adapted, right? They're like, okay, try my best here. Whatever it is I can't do. You didn't lock down my browser, so I'm Googling it. It's fine. But to now, it's, you have to be in person taking this quiz. Good luck. Because you're going to need it. And I think they don't 100%, you know, they're not down for that shift because no one told them that shift was coming. Yes, we may have prepared them saying, okay, it's going to look different, it's going to look different, it's going to look different. But there wasn't like the tangible of how. And so it was I'll believe it when I see it. And now this semester, I have a lot of students that are seeing it. And there are some professionals and some professors and some teachers that are, you know, holding true to some adaptability, but others that are pretending it didn't happen. And I think that rewarding of the adaptability they did show, and the grit that was developed and put on display in a very difficult time to be a student, hasn't necessarily carried over. And they're being asked to do a lot more with less guidance, which was interesting because a year ago there was less guidance, but the parameters over what was expected, you know, was looser. Now it's, you've gotten used to less guidance, I'm going to raise the bar. But there wasn't necessarily any scaffold for that. So they're like, what is
Whiplash. And so, and this is where I really wanted to tie together. So, and Adam, like we presented this with social well-being and motivated learning, both very positive. I would argue that in both of them, there's a layer of confidence that's necessary to feel social well-being. Confidence in your social self, and motivated learning is confidence in yourself as a learner. So I'd just love to hear a little bit of how confidence is being checked, especially in transitions, like why new situations you might not be the most confident in, like psychologically how that plays into it, especially that movement from the safety of home, the safety behind the screen. And then also just a little bit, I mean, I'll get to this after, but then like a segue towards almost like a little bit of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of where there is an interplay between social well-being and learning. So where confidence plays in with both of those, and then also how they kind of interact with one
Sure. So in psychology, there's the term self-efficacy. And for those who aren't familiar with self-efficacy, it's our own belief about our ability to accomplish a task successfully. So if I've tied my shoes a dozen times, I know I'm going to be able to tie my shoe the 13th time. I have high self-efficacy in that, right? So what we've seen is over the past 2 years, as both of you have mentioned, kids haven't had to flex that muscle. They've lost the confidence in their ability because they haven't had to use it. They no longer have high self-efficacy in meeting deadlines, in completing these assignments, which, prior to COVID maybe would have been like standard, like, all right, that's the expectation, fine. But because things were so relaxed, they lost the ability to say, oh yeah, I can handle that. Great. Because they had such loose requirements. All of a sudden now we have these really strict requirements, and it's almost like this rebound that happens. And we see it in a lot of different behaviors psychologically. So we see it with gambling, we see it with a bunch of different addictions, we see it any behavior really. If you give something consistently and then you take it away, that behavior is going to increase dramatically for a short period of time, right? There's going to be a behavior burst, and then it's going to crash back down. And that behavior burst is their effort to no, gimme. This worked before, it's going to work again. And it's not. So I personally see a lot of my clients who are in high school and college almost do this rebellion to these higher standards that are now being put on them. And I think it's their way of demonstrating kind of like an FU to how can you switch it up so quickly, so nonchalantly, when it's not fair to them, right? But, and this is the psychologist in me, I also think it's important just to highlight for 30 seconds, having some empathy for the other side of it as well, where students have struggled with this adaptability, but so have the teachers, so have the professors, because they're not the ones making the decisions, right? They were told on, Wednesday everything was normal, Thursday everything is shut down, we have 2 days to get everything virtual and convert all your lesson plans to the virtual environment, create Google Classrooms, get on Canvas, learn it over a weekend. And you have younger teachers who can adapt easier, and then you have teachers who are 60 who have been doing it the same way their entire career. All of a sudden, how do I use Google Classroom? What is that? Let me call my grandchild and have them teach me. So I think there has to be some balance.
And so just to jump over, Alyssa, I'd love to just hear a little bit about where you see an overlap between, and I swear to the audience members, this is moving towards these solutions and strategies, and just why, when you think about social well-being or the lack thereof, and motivated learning or the lack thereof, what do you see as, there's not always a connection. But Alyssa, maybe talk about a case, someone you've worked with, where a problem in one area was manifesting in the other. I know we had a student we've shared that really struggled socially. Never went to the dorm room, wasn't on campus, would start to be late to class, wouldn't know what was going on in the class. And so was it really an academic problem? It was manifesting as one, It was manifesting as poor grades. It was manifesting this way, but it was rooted in social. And so I'd just love to hear, as a coach from the outside, for both other professionals and for parents, how do you sift through that? How do you sift through almost like the causality? And then just further through a coaching lens, when we try to teach clients this, why is that so important? To sift through and find the root problem.
When we think about that, I'm looking mostly like that difference between capability and capacity. And that is, I think, really how we make sense of how certain challenges manifest, right? So if we think about, the behaviors that we're seeing, the consequences of those behaviors, where individuals are impacted, it may be on that academic front, but then we take a look and, we look at evaluations and whatever type of data that we have, and we see that, like, okay, this isn't necessarily a question of capability, right? But something else. And so that's where I think, I always take kind of a very much like a constructivist approach to this in terms of what are all of the players in the game, right? Like, the math test is just one factor, right? What does everything else look like? What is someone's participation in the room, the process of them even getting into that room, right? All of the things that they're encountering before that, and seeing how each one of those factors chips away at capacity. So even though I may be able cognitively to do well on my math test, all of these things that I've stumbled across that shake my confidence in my math skills, that impacts the way I feel when I enter that room, the way that the perceptions I have of other people, and how it is that I'm perceiving that they're making sense of my behavior, all kind of skews what someone then can interpret as my capability. So from a coaching perspective, we're looking at kind of what is it that we're able to accomplish within this context? And then how do we play with the context, or how do we build in some skills, some strategies, some tools, so that way the context is a little bit more accessible, so that way we can display a better representation of what we're capable of, right? And then I say this phrase all the time, we're building confidence and competence, right? Able to take the step back and saying, okay, I understand that I have a plan, a process to navigate X, Y, and Z, to execute, whatever, with a higher level of independence. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Casey.
I have two simple follow-ups there. So part one, sorry for the twofer. How important is a plan to help people that struggle with adaptability? Part one. And then part two, from what you said, why don't you start there? I think I'm losing the part two. So part one, how much does it help having a plan and previewing to at least prepare, not necessarily make it easy, but to prepare for adaptability, like tests on our adaptability skills?
Well, I think we don't know what we don't know. What we don't know makes us nervous, right? If I don't have a frame of reference, I'm going in blind. So in the same way that, a coach goes into work with an individual to support a situation, we want that individual to be at least armed with something, even if they know that what they're going to encounter is a question mark. We want them to know that it's going to be a question mark, right? And I think that's where the adaptability comes in. What's different from, I would say, our line of work, Casey, is that in years past, I think about like preparing students for college, right? Years past, we would get high school seniors and we say, okay, we're going to work on executive function skills so you can be successful in college. This is what college is going to look like. This is what you might be able, but might have at your disposal. Let's figure out how to access those resources. Last year, we sent a lot of students off to college.
We didn't know.
I'm not sure what your college is going to look like, but trust me on this. And that's where we have to build a lot of that adaptability skills where, you know, before was, okay, I don't know, but you know, right, Alyssa? And now it's like, but how do we be okay with not knowing, right? And still have sometimes.
Sorry. To bring up, I mean, all of that makes so much sense, and where psycho ed evals can really shine, because like you said, you don't know what you don't know. The psycho ed evaluation is a beautiful, it's, I mean, I guess a tool, but a very comprehensive tool that can shine the light on the areas that you didn't know you were struggling in. So parents and students themselves and teachers will be able to say, like, something's going on. Like, I'm not doing well in math, or I'm not doing well with reading or writing. I don't know why though. A psycho ed evaluation, when done properly, will be able to pinpoint why you're not succeeding or why you're struggling in that area. And again, and that can be because like you're thriving in these other situations. So for instance, someone can do so well on one section of math in a psycho ed eval and do so horribly on another section because there are timed and untimed portions of the test. So if you're put under the time constraint, which creates a sense of pressure, and you don't do well, but you can do perfectly well without the pressure of timed, then a good psycho ed eval will give a recommendation of extended time in the classroom for evaluations, which in turn, you know, you guys as coaches will be able to use that information and go, okay, so what executive functioning task or skill do we need to work on to improve your confidence with time pressures, and how can we build on that? So it's a very reciprocal relationship where, you know, the psycho ed will impact the student in the classroom, but also how you as coaches will be able to benefit and help the student thrive, because they know the least. We shed some light on it, and then the coaches will interpret that information we provide, and they'll shine the light on the student and say, all right, this is where you need to be looking. These are the tools we need.
I think sometimes it's really satisfying, and what builds comfort is a lot of times, like those reports, the evaluations, they give names to something that someone has always struggled to articulate that they were experiencing. So it's very validating, but then at the same time informs how it is that
Absolutely.
we're going.
I just think it's also really important to focus on, it can help us identify where there's not a problem. And so sometimes we may think there's a problem somewhere and it's not actually there. Like my favorite is distractibility. Oh, I get distracted all the time. I often say, is it always distraction or is it a lack of problem solving? If we see on a psycho ed, there's not a lot of distraction going on, that's not what it is, then like it's just so important that the strategies are rooted in what the real problem is, because otherwise you don't gain any traction there. Adam, you're going to say something?
No, I was just going to underscore what you were saying. It's not always about a problem. Sometimes that problem comes from the wrong environment. So it's not a problem at all with the individual, right? And this is what we see a lot with giftedness. The kid excels, right? He might be in the superior, very superior IQ range and achievement range, but he's not given the opportunity to shine. Like it's almost, he's too big for the space he's in. So he can't continue to grow if he's trapped.
So, Alyssa, I remember what the second part of my question was based off what you were saying. Sometimes as professionals or parents, like obviously we always have the best intentions. We want to help, we want to remove these struggles. Why, through a coaching lens, is it so important to start with asking the individual about what strategies they think might help? Like, and I'll just give an example of someone I work with. There's no issue in his AP Gov class. No issue. It's golden. It's great. Didn't do well on the first test. Didn't know how the professor tested. He's going to do it again. He's going to actually do the study guide this time. Now, from the outside, there was a tutor thrown into the situation here. My first question is, who asked for the tutor? Did the student ask for the tutor, or was it the parent? And so in that context, I bring that one up because if the student asked for the tutor, he may have told me he's golden in the class, but he's advocating for another type of support. If the parent asked for the tutor, then it was from an outside observer saying, here's this support. Why does that sometimes mess up the equation? Why is it so important to start with the individual to try and come up with strategies? How does that help with identifying problems?
So I think, you know, if we look at all behavior as communication, right? I think kids, people generally communicate what it is that they need. It's just whether or not that communication is accessible. And I think, oh, what's her name? I want to say Carla Shalaby. Her idea, her work is around like troublemakers, right? And the metaphor she uses is canaries in a coal mine, right? When there's something, traditionally coal miners would take the burden to the mine with them. Something wasn't right with the environment, they would sing. Kids find a way to sing. We just don't always read it, right? So by starting directly with the individual and trying to make sense of whatever it is that they've put out, like they direct you in the course of really where the real issue lies, not the perception of the problem, right? It could be that in the case of the AP Gov, it's like, is he struggling with content, or if is there something else, you know, that's at play here? Relying just on, you know, maybe an external perception of what it is that someone needs very rarely, you know, is exactly 100% on the mark. And also it doesn't necessarily, you know, create that groundwork for independent problem solving, right? When we work with individuals as a coach, I put a lot of the faith on them, right? That you are able to help identify what it is that you need in this situation. We are going to figure that out together. I don't have an answer. I might have some solid suggestions, but at the same time, I don't live in your head, right? I think that's a phrase that I frequently say. I think if you polled clients, right? I don't live in your head. I could be wrong, but you tell me, and then we go from there. It communicates that competence, right? There's a presumption of competence that you can then navigate figuring out this situation and others, right? You are a key consultant in trying to identify what is going on, whether that's a problem, whether it's just, you know, something that needs to be shifted, or just made more accessible. Are you smiling?
Yeah, just an hour flies by when you're having fun. So I wanted to give Adam just an opportunity for any kind of last minute words of advice, or even just kind of what we were just talking about on that idea of problems and like really trying to get to the root of them. Any last piece of advice to share with the audience?
I think Alyssa capped it off quite well, where, you know, the student is going to sing, was the phrase you used. Don't be so quick to assume that there's a problem behavior just because they're acting out. They could be acting out because there's a deficit that they don't know how to vocalize. You know, my favorite story is there was a client of mine who would always act out in English class, great student otherwise, but act out in English class and would get kicked out every time. And it's because he couldn't read. He didn't feel confident in his ability to read, and he didn't want to say, I don't know how to read, that's embarrassing, but he'll be the badass that gets kicked out of class and is the jokester. So that's how he coped with it. But if someone didn't ask the right questions, you would have just thought he was trying to be the class clown. So trust if your kid is demonstrating, if your student is demonstrating a certain behavior that's problematic at face value, dig a little deeper. And Casey, like you said, it never hurts to have more information, whether it's, you know, just an entire psychoed eval or just a heart-to-heart conversation about what's going on. It can't hurt.
And yeah, and I think just to kind of sum up, behaviors manifest in many different ways in response to many different things. I love that example, Adam, of the kid getting kicked out of English class, can't read. I don't care about school. It's struggling with certain skill deficits. And so oftentimes problem solving is a journey. It's not looking up an answer in the back of the textbook. It's kind of flipping to a random page in the back of the textbook and hoping the answer is in there. A lot of this is through trial and error. Ways to gather more information about oneself is a great start. So understanding how your brain works, it's a great area to start, because then you can start checking things off the list. It's not this, it's not this. And this is really where it does tie back to grit and resilience. It's okay to have a poor outcome. Learn from it, adapt, and do something different. And that's really where this ties together with the social well-being and motivated learning. Build up confidence, not through always getting things that you want, the way you want it, how you want it. Shifting that focus towards the adaptability is the skill to encourage. And involving them as much in that process as possible. But if they don't want you involved, trying to find another access point. I know that's something both Adam and Alyssa do. Like, you can't force it your way. You got to meet the clients where they're at. You got to meet patients where they're at. And so
Absolutely.
Really, it's all about this journey and not taking things on face value, but having patience with the process. Just what's that Chumbawamba song? I get knocked down, but I get up again. That's what it's got to be. It's got to be a fun activity. Poor outcomes aren't negative, so that we encourage that growth mindset. To keep digging, because if someone's not going to class and it's because they're nervous to be around their peers, they might not open up about it. Very vulnerable. Thank you so much, Adam. Thank you, Alyssa. I appreciate you guys spending, it's Tuesday? It's only Tuesday? Well,
It's only Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday night, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll be sending out a recording of this. And so if you think anyone would benefit from it, please share it with everyone. Thank you again, Adam.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great night.